Good morning. Today we look at Mark chapter 12, verses 1 through 27. And again, now this is during those last few days that Jesus is on earth. He has had his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, and the Pharisees and the religious leaders keep coming and testing Jesus. And so, just as yesterday ended, they had asked, where his authority came from. And right after he said, I'm not going to tell you, chapter 12 begins with, then he began to speak to them in parables. And he tells the parable of the landowner, the man who has a vineyard. And he plants and he puts a watchtower in it and he leases it. And he goes to another country. And he sends some servants to collect his share of the produce. And the tenants kill these servants, and he sends others, and they do the same. They kill the servants. And then the landowner sends his son, thinking, surely they will respect my son. And you know the story. Same thing happens, that the son is also killed, because then the tenants figure he has no one else, so he won't send anybody else. And, the land will be ours. It'll be all ours, whatever they may be thinking. But Jesus asks, what will the landowner do? And, they say that, well, he will come and destroy the vineyards. He will come and destroy those people. And he tells that parable, Jesus does, to these religious leaders. And they're smart enough to figure out that he's talking about them. That, the servants that have come to collect the produce have been other prophets, maybe even John the Baptist, and the religious leaders have, and the people, not just the religious leaders, but the people too, and the rulers of the land. And you think about the former kings and queens who were not following God at all, but they rejected God. They rejected the prophets, and Jesus is saying, they're going to reject me, the Son of God, as well. He doesn't come right out and say that I am the Son of God, but, these people, they've got a little bit of common sense, I hope. And some of them have it figured out, Nicodemus for one, and a couple of the others. But, Jesus tells this parable, and they understand it's against them. So, verse 12 says, when they realized he told it against them, they wanted to arrest him, but they were afraid of the crowd. They were afraid of the people, because the people were still excited for Jesus. They were still in that Palm Sunday mood of Hosanna, welcome, King, this is the Messiah, welcome the King of the Jews. And they weren't calling him King of the Jews, but the people were enthralled with Jesus yet at this time. And the religious leaders respected the people enough, feared the people enough, is what Mark says, that they left and went away. And then it says, then they sent to him some Pharisees and Herodians. So they sent others of their group. The Pharisees, the Herodians, I've said before, are Jewish people who appreciate Herod, this Roman ruler, and they're going to test him. And the test, we have a denarii, is it legal to pay taxes to Caesar? Because, if, Caesar called himself God, they were to worship him as God. And, and so if Jesus was to say, well, yes, of course we pay taxes to Caesar, it would be like blaspheming against God. But Jesus, Mark says, he understood their hypocrisy. They were coming to him with this question that all they were trying to do was to trip him up. And Jesus says, show me the coin. And whose picture is on it? Well, of course, Caesar. And he says that famous line, render then unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. Reminding them that just as in that parable of the landowner, that, the landowner had a right to his share of the produce. And I think about that, in today's world, farmers rent, lease, share crop, different land. And if they don't pay the landowner a fair share of the crop, whether it's through a share crop or a cash rent or however they do it, they're most likely not going to be farming that very long. And Jesus is saying, this whole creation is God's. And until the time comes that we, people, humanity, understand that and pay tribute and respect and honor to God, it isn't going to be any different. So yeah, we are to be the best citizen we can of our country. But we are also to remain firmly loyal to God. And this is what Jesus is saying. And so Jesus, says that, give to the emperor, Caesar, what is his. And again, these religious leaders, it says, were amazed at his wisdom. They were utterly amazed at him. And so he continues to shut down this group of Pharisees, the religious leaders, the Herodians, the scribes and everything. So another group, the Sadducees, come. And this is a group that we know that doesn't believe in the resurrection. And so they ask Jesus this question about a woman who marries first one brother, then all 7 brothers, and has no children. And in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? What a strange question to come from someone who doesn't believe in the resurrection. I mean, if they don't believe in the resurrection, where does this question come from? So even, in a way, it kind of points me to remembering and thinking that some of these people who claim to be absolute atheists, they know who God is. They may claim that they don't believe in God or they don't respect God. But just like these Sadducees that say, we don't believe in the resurrection, to come and ask about the resurrection, they knew that there were enough people that believed in it that, maybe there is something to it. And there's a saying from, back from World War I, there are no atheists in foxholes. Because, by World War II, there weren't really, so the foxholes weren't such a big deal. But World War I and, former battles, we all know that there's a higher power, a higher deity of some sort. And, there are people that will avow absolutely no belief in it. But I think that, this time when the Sadducees, who don't believe in the resurrection, come and ask Jesus about the resurrection, helps me to hope that there is a window, that there is this seed has been planted. And it may not have sprouted and grown yet in some of these people, this seed of faith, but it's there. And, Jesus, in response to that, he says, you don't understand heaven. Heaven is different than earth. And this, what we read today, it ends with, he is the God, not of the dead, but of the living. You are quite wrong, Jesus says. He's not the God of the dead. He's the God of the living. He's the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses and Elijah. And Jesus mentions all these people. And there were Elijah and Enoch were taken up into heaven alive. They never died on this earth. They were taken up into heaven alive. And Jesus too, after his resurrection from the dead, he was taken up into heaven alive. So God is the God of the living. And that's one of the things that gives me such hope and promise that, like a couple of days ago, I had a funeral for a man I've known all my life. But in my heart and in my mind, I believe that, his spirit still lives in God's presence because God is the God of the living. Praise be God. And thanks to Jesus.